Remember when Star Trek Voyager made being lost in space feel like the greatest adventure in the galaxy? One stranded crew, one impossible journey home, and a kind of hope that stayed stronger than anything the Delta Quadrant threw at them. But after the cameras stopped rolling, real life carried the cast far beyond Voyager. Some became Star Trek icons, some found quieter paths, and some left behind final chapters fans still remember with sadness. Let's look back at Star Trek, Voyager, then and now. Captain Janeway was played by Kate Mulgrew at the age of 40. Sharp, stubborn, and carrying the whole weight of a lost Starfleet crew on her shoulders, Janeway became the captain who had to make the hard calls with no Federation safety net behind her. She could be warm one moment, terrifyingly firm the next, and somehow made a cup of coffee feel like part of command protocol. Currently 71, remains one of the most respected women in the Star Trek universe. Away from Voyager, she reached a new generation through Orange is the New Black, while her return to Janeway in animated Star Trek projects reminded fans just how much authority that voice still carries. Janeway had that old-school captain energy. She was not perfect, and that is part of why people still argue about her choices. Lost in the Delta Quadrant, she had to be captain, scientist, protector, and sometimes the bad guy in someone else's story, and that made her unforgettable. Neelix was played by Ethan Phillips at the age of 40. Loud, colorful, and always trying a little too hard to keep spirits up, Neelix brought warmth and chaos into Voyager's long trip home. He was cook, guide, morale officer, occasional headache, and somehow the guy who could make even a dangerous alien shortcut feel like a dinner conversation. These days, is 71 years old and still closely connected to the Voyager fanbase. Outside Star Trek, he had a long career in comedy, theater, film, and television, including Benson and many guest roles that showed how naturally he could slide between funny, strange, and heartfelt. Neelix is one of those characters fans either loved right away or grew into later. Under all the bright clothes and big energy, there was a lonely survivor who just wanted to belong. On a ship full of officers trying to get home, he helped make Voyager feel a little less cold. Seven of Nine was played by Jeri Ryan at the age of 29. Cold, precise, and still carrying the trauma of her Borg past, Seven brought a whole new tension to Voyager. She was not simply learning to be human in a soft, easy way, she was fighting her way back from a life that had been stolen from her. Today, at 58, she is still one of the most recognizable faces in modern Star Trek. After Voyager, she appeared in shows like Boston Public, Body of Proof, and Bosch, then returned as Seven in Star Trek Picard, where the character came back older, tougher, and much more battle-worn. Seven had that rare thing where she could be intimidating and heartbreaking in the same scene. The catsuit got attention, sure, but the real reason fans stayed with her was the pain underneath it. That quiet struggle to decide who she was when the Borg no longer got to answer for her. Commander Chakotay was played by Robert Beltran at the age of 41. Calm, loyal, and carrying the complicated history of being a former Maquis leader, Chakotay gave Janeway someone who could challenge her without trying to take the ship from her. He brought a quieter, spiritual energy to the bridge, even when the writing around him did not always know what to do with it. Currently 72, he remains closely tied to Voyager for many fans. Outside Star Trek, he continued working in film, television, and theater, and later returned to the franchise through Star Trek Prodigy, giving Chakotay another chapter long after the Delta Quadrant journey ended. He had strong moments, especially as Janeway's steady second-in-command, but he also felt underused at times. Still, when Voyager needed calm in the middle of chaos, Chakotay's presence helped hold the crew together. Ensign Harry Kim was played by Garrett Wang at the age of 26. Young, eager, and stuck learning Starfleet the hard way, Harry was the fresh-faced officer who got thrown into the Delta Quadrant before he had any real chance to grow up. He was polite, nervous, loyal, and somehow stayed an ensign for 7 straight seasons. These days, at 57, he is still warmly connected to the Voyager fan community. Away from the show, he has appeared at conventions, worked in voice and screen projects, and become known for speaking openly and humorously about Harry Kim's strange lack of promotion. Harry gave Voyager its rookie point of view. He made mistakes, got homesick, fell for the wrong people, and kept hoping things would work out. Fans joke about the ensign thing, but that is also why he stuck around in people's memories. He felt like the young officer who never stopped trying. Michael Jonas was played by Raphael Sbargi at the age of 31. Nervous, secretive, and slowly sinking deeper into betrayal, Jonas brought a darker edge to Voyager's early seasons. He was not a big villain with speeches and grand plans. He was the quiet crewman making bad choices in the background, while the ship was already fighting to survive. Currently 62, he has built the kind of career where a lot of people recognize the voice before the face. He also expanded his work into games and animation, becoming especially familiar to sci-fi fans as Carth Onasi in Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, along with screen roles in Once Upon a Time and Risky Business. Jonas gave the show a nice bit of paranoia. Voyager was supposed to be one crew trying to get home, but his story reminded viewers that not everyone on board had fully settled, forgiven, or chosen the same side. On a lost ship, one quiet traitor was enough to make the whole place feel less safe. Lieutenant Tuvok was played by Tim Russ at the age of 39. Controlled, logical, and quietly sharper than almost everyone around him, Tuvok gave Voyager its calm Vulcan center. He was Janeway's old friend, the ship's security officer, and the guy who could look completely unimpressed while everyone else was falling apart. Nowadays, at 70, he is still one of the actors fans most strongly connect with Vulcan.com after Leonard Nimoy. His career also stretched into music, directing, and later Star Trek Returns, while roles in shows like iCarly and Samantha Who showed a lighter side away from the security console. Tuvok had that dry, straight-faced cool that sneaks up on you. He did not chase laughs, but one eyebrow, one pause, or one brutally logical comment could land harder than a joke. On a ship full of stress, emotion, and very questionable Delta Quadrant decisions, Tuvok made restraint feel powerful. Lieutenant Tom Paris was played by Robert Duncan McNeil at the age of 30. Cocky, talented, and carrying the baggage of past mistakes, Tom started as the pilot with a reputation problem. He could be charming, reckless, and annoying all at once, but once Voyager needed someone at the helm, he was exactly the kind of troublemaker you wanted flying the ship. These days, at 61, he has spent much of his career on the other side of the camera. He expanded that second chapter into directing and producing, working on shows like Chuck, The Orville, and Resident Alien. Not a bad landing after years of dodging trouble in the Delta Quadrant. Tom Paris felt like the crew member who had to grow up while everyone was watching. He went from rule breaker to husband, father, and trusted officer without losing that cocky little spark. Fans remember the jokes and the flying, but also the way he slowly became someone the crew could actually count on. The Doctor was played by Robert Picardo at the age of 41. Sharp, sarcastic, and originally treated more like a tool than a person, the Doctor became one of Voyager's best surprises. He started as an emergency program stuck in sickbay, but before long he was arguing, singing, complaining, and stealing scenes like he had been human all along. Today, at 73, he is still one of the most recognizable faces from the Voyager crew. His career also expanded far beyond the holographic Doctor, with memorable roles in Stargate Atlantis, China Beach, The Wonder Years, and plenty of genre projects where his dry timing always seemed to fit. The Doctor had that perfect mix of ego and loneliness. He could be hilariously full of himself one minute, then suddenly hit you with something sad about identity, freedom, or wanting to be seen as real. For a character who began as a medical program, he ended up with one of the most human journeys on the ship. Lieutenant Walter Baxter was played by Tom Virtue at the age of 37. Steady, professional, and part of the larger Starfleet crew trying to survive the Delta Quadrant, Baxter helped make Voyager feel like more than just the main cast. He was one of those officers who reminded viewers that the ship still had a full crew working behind every crisis. Currently 68, he has built a long career as one of those actors people recognize instantly, even when they cannot place the name right away. His work moved across sitcoms, dramas, and family television, including roles in Even Stevens, The Secret Life of the American Teenager, and many guest appearances over the years. Baxter was not there to take over the story, and that was fine. A show like Voyager needed familiar crew members in the background, people at stations, in corridors, and on away missions, to make the long trip home feel like it belonged to a whole ship, not just the senior officers. Lieutenant Joe Carey was played by Josh Clark at the age of 40. Reliable, practical, and one of the early engineering faces on Voyager, Carey helped show the pressure of keeping a stranded starship alive. He was not flashy, but he had that dependable crewman energy, the kind of guy you would want nearby when the engines started acting up again. These days, at 71, he is still remembered by Voyager fans for a role that felt small at first but ended up carrying real weight. His acting career also included work in Star Trek: The Next Generation, Star Trek Enterprise, and other television appearances, giving him a quiet but steady place inside the franchise. He was not a legend, a prodigy, or a miracle worker. He was just one of the people trying to keep the ship running. That made his later fate hit harder than expected, because Voyager suddenly reminded us that even familiar background faces could be lost. Lieutenant Ayala was played by Tarek Ergin at the age of 34. Quiet, steady, and almost always somewhere on the ship when things went wrong, Ayala became one of Voyager's most familiar background officers. He did not need big speeches. Just seeing him at tactical, security, or on an away team helped the ship feel like it had a real crew. Nowadays, at 65, he is still remembered by sharp-eyed Voyager fans as one of the show's most consistent recurring faces. His screen career stayed closely tied to Star Trek, and Ayala became the kind of character fans notice more on rewatch, when the background crew starts to feel like part of the family. Ayala is a good example of why Voyager felt lived in. Not every officer needed a spotlight episode. Sometimes a familiar face in the corridor, on the bridge, or standing behind Janeway during a crisis was enough to make the long trip home feel more real. Kes was played by Jennifer Lien at the age of 21. Gentle, curious, and carrying a strange kind of innocence, Kes brought softness to Voyager's early years. She was young even by Ocampa standards, but she had empathy, courage, and that quiet sense that her life was moving faster than everyone else's. Currently 52, she has lived mostly outside the public eye after stepping away from acting. Her career before and during Voyager included work in Phenom, voice acting in Men in Black the series, and a few film and television roles, but Kes remains the character most fans connect to her name. Kes still feels like one of Voyager's more bittersweet stories. She brought warmth to the ship, especially through her bond with the Doctor, but her exit left fans divided. Some remember her as underused, others as quietly special, and honestly, both can be true. Naomi Wildman was played by Scarlett Palmers at the age of 9. Bright, curious, and born into a life no child could have chosen, Naomi became Voyager's youngest reminder of what the crew was fighting for. She grew up surrounded by aliens, officers, holodecks, and danger, yet somehow still felt like a real kid trying to understand her strange home. These days, at 37, she has mostly stepped away from acting and built a much quieter life. After Voyager, she became widely known as Kyra on Reba, then later focused on music, photography, and personal health after years in the spotlight. Naomi gave Voyager something the show needed, a child's view of the Delta Quadrant. While the adults argued about survival, fuel, and shortcuts home, she looked at the ship like it was her whole world. That made the journey feel bigger than Starfleet. It was also someone's childhood. Seska was played by Martha Hackett at the age of 34. Smart, bitter, and always playing a deeper game than she let on, Seska brought real betrayal into Voyager's early story. She was not just a difficult crew member, she was a Cardassian spy hiding under everyone's nose, and that twist gave the ship a nasty little shock. Currently 65, she is still strongly remembered by Voyager fans for turning Seska into one of the show's most memorable early villains. Her career also moved through plenty of television work, including roles in The X-Files, I Heart Huckabees, and other Star Trek appearances before Seska really became her signature Trek role. Seska gave Voyager something it badly needed in the beginning: trouble from inside the ship. The Delta Quadrant was already dangerous enough, but a traitor among the crew made everything feel more personal. She was messy, angry, and absolutely not interested in playing nice. Ensign Vorik was played by Alexander Enberg at the age of 23. Calm, logical, and very Vulcan on the surface, Vorik became one of Voyager's familiar engineering faces. He was usually controlled and professional, which made the moments when that control cracked feel even more awkward and very, very Vulcan. As of now, he is 54 years old and lives a much lower profile life than many of the main cast. He also had a personal link to the franchise through his mother, Jeri Taylor, one of the major creative figures behind Voyager, while his acting work included appearances in Star Trek, The Next Generation, and other television roles. Vorik was never the loudest character, but he helped make the ship feel properly staffed. Engineering needed more than B'Elanna shouting at broken systems. It needed people like Vorik nearby, quietly doing the work and occasionally reminding everyone that Vulcan emotions are never as simple as they look. Ensign Samantha Wildman was played by Nancy Hauer at the age of 29. Gentle, brave, and suddenly facing motherhood on the far side of the galaxy, Samantha gave Voyager one of its most human problems. She was not just an officer trying to get home. She was a mother raising a child on a lost starship. Nowadays, at 60, she has built a creative life that moved beyond acting alone. She later became active as a director, writer, and producer, working behind the camera as well as in front of it, which gave her career a different path after her time on Voyager. Samantha's story made the trip home feel more personal. Naomi was born into the Delta Quadrant, and that changed the emotional stakes. Suddenly, Voyager was not only trying to return a crew to Earth, it was carrying the childhood of someone who had never seen it. Ensign Ashmore was played by David Keith Anderson at the age of 38. Quiet, professional, and always part of Voyager's day-to-day survival, Ashmore was one of those crew members who helped the ship feel properly alive. He was not there for big speeches or dramatic command moments, but his presence made the background of Voyager feel real. Currently 69, he is best known to Voyager fans for appearing as one of the ship's recurring background officers. His screen career stayed fairly low profile, but Ashmore became familiar to viewers who pay attention to the crew beyond the main cast. Ashmore is the kind of character you notice more when you rewatch the show. He reminds you that Voyager was not just Janeway, Seven, the Doctor, and the bridge crew. It was a whole ship full of people trying to survive the same strange trip home. Lieutenant Hogan was played by Simon Billig at the age of 31. Restless, sharp, and carrying some of that old Maquis frustration, Hogan added tension to Voyager's early crew dynamic. He was not always easy, but that made sense. Half the crew had been thrown into Starfleet discipline almost overnight. These days, at 62, he has moved through acting, music, and creative work beyond his time in the Delta Quadrant. His career also included roles in television, theater, and voice work, giving him a path that did not stay locked to one sci-fi appearance. Hogan brought a rougher edge to the ship. Voyager's early promise was that Starfleet and Maquis had to learn to live together, and characters like him made that idea feel a little less neat. Not everyone adjusted smoothly, and that friction made the crew feel more believable. Barclay was played by Dwight Schultz at the age of 48. Nervous, brilliant, and still painfully awkward in his own skin, Barclay brought a familiar next-generation face into Voyager's story. He was not on the ship itself, but from the Alpha Quadrant, he became one of the few people who truly obsessed over getting them home. Currently 78, he still has that unmistakable Barclay nervous energy fans remember so well. His career also moved into voice acting, animation, and video games, while many viewers still know him as Howling Mad Murdoch from the A-Team. Barclay gave Voyager hope from the other side. While Janeway's crew was fighting through the Delta Quadrant, he was back home worrying, calculating, and refusing to let the signal die. Awkward as he was, he became one of the people who made Earth feel reachable again. First Majay Cullen was played by Anthony DeLongis at the age of 45. Harsh, proud, and always carrying the swagger of a Kazon leader, Cullen gave Voyager one of its earliest recurring enemies. He was not the most subtle villain, but he had that rough frontier energy that made the Delta Quadrant feel lawless and unpredictable. These days, at 76, he is still closely linked to action work, weapons training, and physical performance. He also became known as a fight choreographer and whip master, working across film, television, and stage, with the kind of skill that makes a scene look dangerous without actually losing control. Cullen belongs to Voyager's rougher early days. Before the Borg took over the spotlight, the Kazon made the Delta Quadrant feel like a bad neighborhood with no Federation rules. He was loud, messy, and sometimes frustrating, but he helped sell that first feeling of being very far from home. Mazzotti was played by Marlee McLean at the age of 12. Quiet, curious, and still carrying the shadow of her Borg past, Mazzotti brought a softer, childlike angle to 7 of 9's story. She was one of the young drones Voyager rescued, and her presence made the damage of assimilation feel smaller, sadder, and more personal. Today, at 42, she lives a very different life away from the screen. After acting as a child, she stepped out of the spotlight and moved into a quieter adult life. So for Voyager fans, Mazzotti remains the role most clearly tied to her time on television. Mazzotti's scenes had a strange sweetness to them. She was a kid trying to understand freedom after being raised inside the Borg Collective, which is a pretty heavy idea for such a small character. Her story gave Voyager a gentler look at what recovery could mean. Lieutenant B'Elanna Torres was played by Roxanne Dawson at the age of 36. Fierce, brilliant, and constantly fighting the storm inside herself, B'Elanna gave Voyager its engine room fire. Half Klingon, half human, and never fully comfortable being either, she made every engineering crisis feel personal. Currently 67, she has built a major second career behind the camera. After Voyager, she moved heavily into directing and producing, working on shows like The Americans, House of Cards, The Good Wife, Lost, and many more. A huge shift from fixing warp cores in the Delta Quadrant. B'Elanna felt raw in a way Star Trek did not always allow. She was angry, funny, vulnerable, and sometimes hard to reach, but that made her feel real. Her relationship with Tom Paris, her friendship with Chakotay, and her struggle with identity gave Voyager some of its most human moments. Voyager's journey home may be over, but the crew still lives on in the hearts of fans who followed every light year. Their faces remind us of hope, change, and the years that passed after the final episode. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more classic cast then and now stories.